What's going on, folks? And welcome to the legendary podcast. My name is David, and welcome to this legendary podcast, the D-constructingTopics podcast. What's going on, everybody? Woo, we got another special one, a meaningful one, a one that I would say the topic that we're going to be talking about today is Martin Luther King's Day. We celebrate and honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we got a little, I always say that when I do these podcasts, keep in mind is this, that sometimes, and in many cases, I like to do what they call like a stew, little different ingredients. In Spanish, un ensopado, chacho, we got the caldero, big caldero, we got a big pot, and we just throw in different ingredients to see what works. I'm pretty sure by the end of the day, that night stew is going to be tasting wonderful. Mwah, así bien, chacho, bien bueno, ya tú sabes. But we got Martin Luther King. We're going to talk a couple of things here and there, but it's more of my perspective in terms of Martin Luther King. Keep in mind, I always tell people, I was born in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. Yes, I'm an unofficial ambassador of Puerto Rico, raised in New York City, Bronx. And just to give you an idea, so sometimes learning about people like Martin Luther King coming here in this country, you just say to yourself, wow. And what better way to kind of get that little Martin Luther King juice flowing? We got a couple of things going on. Let's get it.
My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
And that was Martin Luther King's famous speech on August 28, 1963 in D.C. Just to give you an idea where I'm at with Martin Luther King. And look, Martin Luther King, leader of the one of the leaders of the civil rights movement. Some argue that he was the face of it. But keep in mind is this, the civil rights movement from the 50s to the 60s in the United States, especially for those Black communities fighting for equality, and just not just equality in other, but just equality in many spectrum. But what's interesting about the civil rights movement, me, got a little side. Hey, listen, I'm feeling good, so relax there, little cold, whatever, trying to get to me. I'm trying to do a podcast. It needs to relax. But people forget the civil rights movement. People always kind of, for some reason, and yes, it did happen a lot in the South, but it also happened in New York City, Boston, Chicago, L.A. So you had different sectors, different groups of these civil rights. And for those who are not in United States that want to get, the civil rights movement is basically a movement spearheaded by many Black leaders. Again, there was segregation in the South, legally, my understanding. And here in the North, when I say the South, we're talking about Georgia, the southern states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, and so on. So basically, Black people or people in the Black community, they drank or ate or had to take bus separate from the white. And sadly, for the Black, some of these things, let's just say were not, top shape. You know what I mean? So, it's one of those deals that in the South, they fought for that. In the North, here in New York City, even though segregation was not a thing, for some reason, the system and even Brother Malcolm X kind of spoke about it that, hey, listen, over here, they like to point what's going on in the South, but hey, we got a little kind of going on, segregation here in New York City. So let's go. Martin Luther King, and we're able to start with Martin Luther King because he's a Swiss knife. But, when I say a Swiss knife, am I saying it right? Swiss, right? Knife, meaning that, those little knife with like so many gadgets that you could do. Martin Luther King, my understanding, brother, Martin Luther King Jr., born in January 15. That's why January, it's that day, even though, as I'm recording this, is January 20th, but they always do I believe it's the second or the third Monday. So January it's Martin Luther King's month. So he was born January 15, 1929. And sadly, what happened with Martin Luther King, that he was assassinated in April 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. And what's interesting with Martin Luther King, right? is that when I say he's a Swiss knife, people kind of always remember, and we always talk about what he was fighting for when it comes to the civil rights movement. But he did so much. And sadly, on the day and on the week that he was there in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, for some reason, I kid you not, for some reason, I thought that he was deleted somewhere in Alabama for some reason, but I think that there was some connection between Alabama kind of sanitation workers, or there was some type of strike. For those people who are in the union or the labor union, we do know what it is, a strike. Basically, it's like, we ain't working until you take care of us. You know what I mean? So he's on Tennessee doing his Tennessee thing, Memphis, Tennessee. And sadly, yeah, he was in this sanitation worker strike that affected more than 1,500 black sanitation workers, not getting the proper wages and benefits and whatever comes down to be working. So just to tell you that, he's been all around. What's interesting is this, and some people might either know, do not know, that we might have not Martin Luther King. Now, sadly, Martin Luther King was assassinated. I hate the word, but we got to use that in the context of what happened to his life. But sadly, my understanding, back in 1958, he was doing a little book tour. Remember, Martin Luther King been around doing that, that work. Now, keep in mind, I always tell people, Martin Luther King is a Christian Baptist, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't edit these podcasts. So Martin Luther King comes in that sense of, and one of the philosophy would be that he's on that nonviolent. We're going to talk about that as well in this podcast. But just the fact that we might not have Martin Luther King, because in 1958, when he was doing his thing, his little book tour, he was doing something in Harlem. A young lady by the name of Isola Curry, a black woman. And it's, how can I say, the irony sometimes. And you're going to hear this in every spectrum of people who, let's say, Puerto Ricans in a black neighborhood. I work, with a lot of Albanians, Italians, so on. Dominicans, you're always going to hear this. Sometimes there's people that feel that the people that do more harm to you, in the context that we in United States, and we in this melting pot in New York City with different kind of culture, different type of people, is that a lot of people feel like, hey, listen, the people that do you more harm is your own people, right? We have heard that. Raise your hand if you heard that. Sometimes there's people that feel that way. And sometimes it is true. There is a, how can I say, kind of like a connection in a sense. Because there's only room for, let's say, X amount of Puerto Ricans, X amount of Dominicans, X amount of Italians, Albanians, Polish, blacks, in a country that we are mostly working with white people. I'm just saying. So Isola Curry, a black woman, my understanding is that she was going through a little mental issue. There's not much of info as what it is, but the fact that this black young woman decided to kind of take a jab at Mr. Martin Luther King, and my understanding, he stabbed him almost close to the heart. So in other words, in 1958, we could have let's just say that in this beautiful country, the history of Martin Luther King and the black history and all that, we wouldn't have a Martin Luther King. So, again, it goes back to that situation in regards to that sometimes even in your own people, might do harm to you. You know what I mean? Man, it's one of those things, there's not really much, and it's an interesting story that some people forget, some people hear, but just the fact that we might not have heard, or we might not have Martin Luther King as we know. I'm pretty sure we would have still celebrated Martin Luther King, but he lived for a little bit longer to tell beautiful stories and fight that fight. So we making it happen. The other situation, as you already know, is that the person that assassinated Martin Luther King was James Earl Ray, and he died years ago. And it's one of those things that Martin Luther King have, and I just want to say it and kind of forgot that he's Coretta Scott King, his wife, survived. He had children as well. Coretta Scott King, my understanding, is that she continued the legacy and the fight for Martin Luther King. So let's not forget that. My understanding that his family, his older kids, in a sense, forgave James Earl Ray for who was the person that was convicted for the assassination of Martin Luther King. And what's interesting is that there are still kind of, in a way, people feel that even though this individual was caught, that, and we don't want to go to like this little conspiracy because we are honoring and my point, but I'm only telling you these stories because of what I've experienced knowing the Martin Luther King, and the fact that one of the things there is that, we could go who did it. You know what I'm saying? And my understanding is that it's still a thing. There's some secrets out there, whether it's, let's say the government, let's say it was a private, keep in mind, he was part of the sanitation strike, couldn't be a corporation. We could go different ways, but it's different ways. I'm over here at different ways. I'm over here thinking about James Earl Ray, the person that has been accused and convicted and did jail time of assassinating Martin Luther King. But the fact is this, we don't know. Now, is that something that is interesting? Sure. Depending on what avenues you want to take it. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things that, yeah, people do want to know. I want to know. And again, in the 60s, in this country, we have assassinations of important figures, historical figures. Brother Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy as the President of the United States, Robert Kennedy, his little brother who was running for, or was being a candidate to run for President of the United States years later. So a lot of things was going on in the 60s. The 60s was wild. You know what I'm saying? Now, I bring up Brother Malcolm X to the equation because Brother Malcolm X and let's just say Martin Luther King Jr. or Martin Luther King III, but actually Jr., I'm sorry. They had a little clash going on because Malcolm X, he's a Muslim, right? But even if we take away from that, Malcolm X was from New York City, you feel me? And sometimes I think that sometimes, New York City loves attention. And it could be because Malcolm X representing this part of United States in the civil rights movement. You also had Adam Clayton Powell Jr., politician going on. So they had a little friction with Martin Luther King. Sometimes it could be so many things. But one of the things could be that, hey, New York City wants its attention. Hey, we got issues too. Many of the white folks that, were in support of the civil rights movement, kind of giving money out here to these black communities. Brother Malcolm X and Adam Clayton, hey, listen, you guys over here donating money to send people to the South, but there's a problem here too. And Malcolm X kind of view it as, there's a famous picture where he had a gun and he view it as, if they attacking us, eye for an eye, basically. And the same, to say with Adam Clayton Powell, where he was the politician, that's another podcast there. And then with Martin Luther King, basically being Christian, he was in a nonviolent situation. So I just want to throw that there. That's a different dynamic in itself with what I've heard. As you already know, Malcolm X was very vocal, especially very vocal against or let's just say he tended to kind of say to the white liberals, the friendly white community who funded these kind of civil rights kind of movement or groups or whatever to fight, this racism and all that, Brother Malcolm X, Adam Clayton Powell. You could throw James Baldwin in there. I could go so much with the civil rights. It's a beautiful story. I definitely will be doing one in a lot of people like to say Black History Month. I like to say American history. But it's a beautiful thing. And listen, a lot of people would say that, Martin Luther King might have kind of changed, and in a sense that Martin Luther King, as you already know that these things were happening, that he might have gotten a little bit more aggressive, became more anti-capitalist and anti-war. That time was Vietnam War, and sadly, some people kind of attribute that to, how can I say, his assassination, basically. He was too much of an important figure, so especially in the black community, and he has too much power. Enough is enough, sadly. Some people will see it that way. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, we had the Martin Luther King assassination riots. Now, I bring this up because I remember in 2020, when George Floyd was sadly killed. When I'm going to say that, when I say sadly, because I always say there's no way you should have put a knee behind somebody's back, regardless of anything. So that dude is doing his time. George Floyd got killed, and it led to kind of like a momentum of the black community. And sadly, sometimes it gets co-opted, and you have the rights, right? Now, some people would bring up that there were riots when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and it was kind of like what I would feel as if in the black community is that I would feel, wow, they just bodied our guy, the person that's fighting for our rights. You just basically, boom, he's dead. Oh, we're gonna go after you. Now, my thing with riots, and some people brought up, look, this is what happened in George Floyd riots. People have the rights to riots. People got the right to be angry and kind of vent, right? And people brought up the Martin Luther King riots. And I personally would say this is the sad thing about these riots, especially that people should be more cautious, especially with the situation with George Floyd. Is that riots tend to be co-opted, right? And I say co-opted meaning that some entity grabs it, manipulates it. What happened is this. In Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, wherever some of these riots took place, right? Sadly, it took a while for these communities to rebuild, because you could say the government, right? The United States government could have said, hey, listen, sadly, I understand your grief. Let's put money. Let's rebuild your areas, whatever stores burned down, whatever it happened. I understand your grief. Let's get some leaders. Let's talk it out. You know what I'm saying? But sadly, United States government said, you guys burn that stuff because, your boy over here got killed. You know what? Learn your lesson, basically. So that's why I'm not a fan, or I was not a fan of these riots, because they get co-opted. And sometimes the government would just leave us burning for decades. Like, you guys destroy that store? Let it be. Now, now things has a little bit different, because some of these stores got insurance, whatever. But again, these things get co-opted. So that's another little story of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was named after Martin Luther, something that we have spoke about. Martin Luther was basically the German priest. If a lot of people, especially in the Protestant, Roman Catholic, Martin Luther was an important figure in starting the Reformation back a long time ago. We're talking about like what, 500, 600 years ago. And it's one of those things. Interesting kind of little tidbit there. And I think people have mentioned it. And if you look at Martin Luther King, and if you look at the word Luther, and for those in the Christian church, Protestant church, there are churches that are named after Martin Luther, or let's say Martin Luther, the German priest, or Lutheran church. Woo, I'm over here like, hey. So I just want to bring that up in regards to that. Yes, Martin Luther King does bring an aspect of the nonviolence approach. And when I say nonviolence, I believe even he might have adopted something from Gandhi. It's that basically, all right, you guys can slap us all you want, but we still going to fight. We still going to march. We still going to do our thing. And we still going to do whatever it is until we get it done. And, we got the civil rights bill that was signed in 64, 65, if I'm not mistaken. So he made moves. Again, just to give you a little thing going on, me growing up. So here's somebody like that. And I said to yourself, there's some people, and I grew up, there's some people in the black community who gravitated towards Malcolm X's approach. It's like, all right, you're going to slap me, I'm going to slap you twice. You understand? And, kind of gravitated to Brother Malcolm X a little bit more than Martin Luther King. I apologize, and I don't apologize, right? But, these are individuals with savages. And when I say savages, we're talking about fighting for the justice of everything. But mostly the black community. And, for me to grow up, you hear names, because I was too young when I moved over here, but you hear names that have fought the fight and have fight the fight, and you hear names, and then you gravitate to an individual, and it kind of opens the doors where you want to know. You want to know, as one me Puerto Rican, who's that Puerto Rican version of Martin Luther King? I think some people might have put Pedro Albizu Campo, but I disagree. Pedro Albizu Campo was more like Malcolm X. You know what I mean? In that sense. But I get, Pedro Albizu Campo, that's another podcast. That's way before. But just to give you an idea, as a Puerto Rican kid, to learn this and the struggles here in the black community, you kind of say to yourself, there's still a struggle. The only difference that I could see here now, there's nothing legally that would say, hey, black people cannot do this, black people, there's no laws that impede the black people. What happened is this. It gets co-opted, get confiscated. And sadly, when it comes to Martin Luther King and even Malcolm X, they get a little bit of whitewash, you could say. Because sometimes if you start, and I've heard some speeches where, especially after the assassination of Malcolm, is that, you start to see, Martin Luther King kind of a little bit aggressive because he knows, hey, my time is coming too. And then I saw a speech where his tone was different than what we have studied or what the media have shown, and then there's a speech in 1966, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this is like a year after the assassinated brother Malcolm X. Keep in mind, mine was 1968. So his tone of voice kind of have changed. People call him radical. People started to call him radical, but it's just that the tone, as he was becoming mature, keep in mind, he died at the age of 38, 39? But even that age, as he was becoming, as the change of this country was becoming, kind of, Martin Luther King started to adapt. And I remember it was a speech by Adam Clayton Powell, where he kind of say, okay, I see that, making fun of Martin Luther King. Hey, I see that he's kind of changing the colors there. You know what I mean? Adam Clayton, what a class act. But it's one of those things that you gravitate to these stories and to know that there was another side of Martin Luther King, more a little bit edgy. I'm a little edgy myself, more like, hey, I'm not going to fall into this trap and be a puppet of the system type of deal. But it's always good to know that, hey, Brother Martin Luther King was on that wagon where, hey, what's going on? You know what I'm saying? As much as I'm a Christian and as much as I believe in the nonviolence and love and all that, you guys are pushing my buttons. So that's a little bit of the story of Martin Luther King and what he has meant in terms of my life and me having to understand, keep in mind that I'm from Puerto Rico and coming to this country, that there was a lot of struggles here in New York City, in the South, Chicago, in the black communities. We still struggling. Rest in peace. I want to say Cha-Cha Jimenez, who's a leader of the Young Lords, Puerto Rican, who might have been inspired by Martin Luther King to kind of get these groups, the Young Lords. That's another podcast. I keep saying, that's another podcast. For everything I say, I keep it saying, that's another podcast. But the fact that there's a lot of things that have happened, and these individuals, the Martin Luther King, they have kind of, you could say, sacrificed because they knew that something was going to happen. And they put out there and they fought that fight, the equality, and some of the certain freedoms that we might have experienced because of this individual. But like I always said, freedom in this country comes with an asterisk. Even though there's no laws that forbid for you to do things regardless of what color, creed, religion, whatever it is, keep in mind, we still tied up. We still got shackles. We still are being psyoped and manipulated by some of these mainstream news. And a day like this, feel free to go and put Martin Luther King radical views or Martin Luther King, something to that effect. I don't want to discredit everything that he did. 90% of his life preaching about the nonviolence and the equality. But just check it out. Just check it out. You're going to see some of his speeches. I try to find one, but I'm telling you, sometimes YouTube have a way, and I'm not just going to say YouTube, but the mainstream find a way that when people are waking up and doing their little research out of nowhere, video cannot be found. It changes the algorithm, and that's why sometimes, listen, That's why you're going to please feel free to like, share, comment. If you want to hit me up, if I missed something, if you learned something, feel free to hit me up. Let's make it happen. Much love. This is the D-constructing Topic podcast, and I hope that you enjoy this nice little episode because we making it happen for sure, for sure. And you already know, much love out there. Stay safe. Remember, freedom comes with a price, but just remember, the people like Martin Luther King, man, just remember that. Let's make it happen, and I'm out. Peace.